All right. So now that I gave you some examples of the three C's and explain it to you what it is, you should know then that the three C's are interrelated, they tie in or are connected with the four selves. And this is how we determine who we are, right? So it's at the core of the model, and therefore it's related to all four when it comes to defining who we are. The first one we have is self-enhancement. And self-enhancement is a drive to promote a positive view of oneself. And human beings, we have that innate drive to promote a view that we are competent, attractive, ethical, good, right? And all these good things. And that's just innate, right? It's not as though people are trying to show off, although they might be, right? But the point is that persons have that innate drive to do so. And we see it, of course, reflected today via social media and so on, that we now have more outlets to do so. Whereas in the past, persons would have to perhaps bring it up in conversation. Today, persons can portray that positive view about myself, that I'm an incredible singer, I am an incredible dancer, I am lucky, I am valued. See, this is Valentine's Day, people love me, here's a picture of me being loved with all my flowers and chocolates. Okay, so what we know is that self-enhancement, of course, is related to certain things like better physical, mental health. Once again, when we spoke about the three C's, right? It leads to higher can-do beliefs, and I'll talk about that a bit more soon. But it means that when persons portray that positive view about themselves, they tend to develop an overall belief that they can do things, and that is also something that we'll talk about soon called self-efficacy. Okay. All right. So that's self-enhancement. I don't know if I could draw on the Zoom recording, but that's fine. The second one is self-verification. All right. So self-verification is, of course, where people try to filter out, people try to filter out any sort of information to support who they are. Okay. So they filter out information to support their self-concept. In other words, people are driven to maintain that self-concept that they were trying to portray. So it ties in with self-enhancement, because whenever we receive information that contradicts who we think we are, because it's perception, right? It doesn't mean that's who we are. Then we can filter out the information that doesn't coincide with who we perceive ourselves to be, and accept information that coincides with who we think we are, all right? I'll give you an example, because it's often good to explain these things with examples. Suppose in my examples earlier, I showed you that I perceive myself to be different selves. So let's say I perceive myself to be a good educator, all right? And then when course evaluations came in, so this is my self-enhancement. I perceive myself to be a good educator. I start to post things on LinkedIn saying, 5-star lecturer, best lecturer ever, showing off for that self-enhancement, right? I'm not saying that's true at all, far from. And I receive course evaluations, and then I see students saying, Paul is the worst lecturer ever. This class has some really, why did he bring Beanie Man into class today? That kind of thing. I'm like, God, but it's really bashing me. And then I have like a few other reviews saying, the Beanie Man example was good, I liked it. And Paul's examples were very colorful. So what I could do if I'm engaging in as part of defining who I am, and I engage in self-verification, persons would often filter out information that the negative information, I should say negative, it's not inherently negative, but the information that doesn't coincide with who I perceive myself to be. So if I perceive myself to be that great educator, I'll filter out that bad reviews, and the reviews that support my self-concept, I'll be more likely to accept them. So we find that in terms of the outcomes, persons are more likely to accept information consistent with their self-concept and less likely to accept feedback that contradicts who they perceive themselves to be. And of course, as you could already realize, this has implications for the workplace, because when persons are motivated to reaffirm their self, who they are, who they perceive themselves to be, and so on, then they are less receptive to feedback that contradicts that view of themselves. Okay. Self-evaluation, this is the third one. Here, persons evaluate themselves in three main ways: through their self-esteem, self-efficacy, and locus of control, right? And you would see it in the slides. I think I posted it in the slides, okay? Self-esteem is a person's overall evaluation of their worth, right? So they tend to have this evaluation of how much they are worth, and obviously persons who have high self-esteem are less likely to be influenced by others and tend to have more logical thinking and so on, right? Sorry, this quote is really horrible. Anyway, self-efficacy is the one I mentioned before. So in addition to self-esteem, persons have efficacy beliefs, right? These are beliefs that we can successfully perform a task. Well, as you know, right? So I think we spoke about this before, right? Generally, persons can have this overall belief that they can do things, and persons who engage in high self-enhancement have that can-do belief, right? But self-efficacy is a bit different to general self-efficacy. It means that persons' specific beliefs to do things. I didn't show you any video. I should have shown you any video. My computer here, right? And I could probably just change the camera a bit. Let me see if you guys can see. So that's my, oh God, this is so bad. Yeah, well, all right. And this is the other computer I built up here, right? So great. And the reason I'm showing you that is not to show off or anything like that, obviously, right? Hopefully nobody got dizzy or nauseous with that horrible camera footage. But the point was that I have a high can-do belief for building computers and fixing software issues, computer-related issues, right? That I have high self-efficacy for that. But if I show you my car, you will laugh, all right? I have very low self-efficacy when it comes to repairing cars, and my car is obviously a mess. It's not very good. So we have our self-efficacy is often tied to specific tasks. Persons have high can-do beliefs for certain things. Of course, this increases the likelihood that we will be motivated to perform the task and can and perform at a high level when our self-efficacy is high for specific tasks, okay? The final aspect of our self-evaluation is that of locus of control, not to be confused with the insect locust. It's L-O-C-U-S, right? And this is a general belief about the extent to which we have control over life's events. Generally, there are two extremes here, and we all fall somewhere along these extremes. We have internal locus of control, where persons believe that everything in life happens because of their own decisions. They have full control over it. So everything they do is controlled by their decisions. They have that control, right? High externals believe that everything that happens in life is due to fate, luck, and chance. So those are the two extremes, and usually we would fall somewhere between those extremes. Persons who are closer to high internals tend to have higher self-evaluation, right? They tend to have a higher, which makes sense, right? A better, they value themselves more highly. So obviously, if you put the three together, high self-efficacy, high self-esteem, and more internal locus of control tend to have a higher evaluation of themselves and evaluate themselves more highly. So when we talk about self-evaluation, okay? The final components of the final self is social self, all right? And social self is an interesting one. People are social animals. We all are, right? Humans are social animals. And thus we have that drive to belong. Our ancestors had a drive to belong as well, right? They needed to band together to survive certain things, right? To get food, to survive cold weather, things like that. And humans, like other animals, we are social. So we tend to define ourselves in terms of groups to which we belong or have some sort of attachment, emotional attachment. And you could probably think of some already. And I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to ask questions at the end of each of these short videos. And maybe any kind of supplemental questions, multiple choice questions, that kind of thing. What persons tend to do is they tend to identify with their group in a positive way and view their group in a more positive manner than contrasting groups. So you can start to think of many examples. I noted a few down here of differences in the groups, right? So if I define myself in terms of a group, I might say I am a PC gamer. everything is PC gaming. Well, I packed up my console, I don't use it, I was collecting dust. So I might say, I don't know if anybody here is into gaming, but you hear PC gamers often say PC master race and console peasants, all right? And they'll contrast the two, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to define themselves in terms of one group of PC gamers and say, well, the other group, the contrasting group of gamers, they're not as good. They're beneath me, right? You can probably think about it in terms of Carnival, for instance. I know Carnival is coming up just now, and some of you might say, well, you play, for those of you who play Carnival, play Master. Why is my video playing? Yeah, some of you might play Mass. I'll check the video after this, right? I think maybe I pulled something. Trying to show my computer. Oh, anyway, you might say, well, you are my band. I'm a hearts person. Hearts is the best. Everything else is inferior. We are the best band, or Tribe is the best band. Everything else is inferior. That kind of thing. So they try to portray themselves as being the best in terms of their group. Trying to identify themselves as a hearts band player, a PC gamer. People often do it for religion. We see it all the time, especially in our country where we have diverse religious groups. You might see some person say, proud to be Catholic. I see that sticker on people's vans. Sometimes in the morning, I see that proud to be Catholic. They identify themselves as a Catholic and with that group, and everybody else. And it happens for all Muslims, Hindus, Muslims, Catholics. I see it a lot. And they might not necessarily bring down contrasting groups because of, we have religious tolerance to some extent. Some persons still do. But the point is they try to portray themselves as better, in a sense, right? According to that religious group to which they belong. So yeah, so it's just a way, one final self that we have to determine our four selves. So when we're talking about perception and we're talking about perceiving ourselves, we're really talking about how the three C's, complexity, consistency, and clarity, interact with our four selves: self-enhancement, self-verification, self-evaluation, and social self, which taken together, our perception of ourselves influence our motivation, our ability, right? Perceived ability, role clarity, even at times. And of course, all of the individual, most, if not all of the individual behaviors that we spoke about, like task performance, OCB, counterproductive work behaviors. So we find that, of course, perception of oneself is so important to understand to better determine how we can improve ourselves, right? Our view of ourselves. Okay. So there's a question I was going to ask you. I'm not going to ask you this example. This is the example we would have done in class, but instead I'll ask you some questions at the end of this video. Okay. So I'll just pause the recording now before I move on to the second part, which will be no longer perception of oneself, but how we perceive others. And I have some good examples here. We go through that after. Okay. Let me just stop the video.